Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Uh, Nice to see you all today. I think this is doing very nice. Our webinar series have been taken up very well by all of you. So let me introduce myself. I am Associate Professor Dr. Kranti. I am currently working as Deputy Dean for Research at Masa University. So to make sure all of us have got a productive days when we are sort of stuck at home or not able to do whatever we were supposed to do at our clinics. So the pursuit of excel in the field of dentistry remains in our hearts. We all know that you all can't stay away from clinics and you all can't stay away from academics or whatever you are doing. So in this uh, continuity, we would like to continue with our webinar series, the Faculty of Dentistry, Masa University. This is our fifth webinar series, and we are planning to do our lecture on essential tips on surgical removal of impacted mandibular third molars for general practitioners. We are choosing all our topics based on the request by all of you. Actually, we are doing a survey form at the end of every lecture. So, and you all are providing a very good feedback, and we are getting amazing feedback. I think the number of viewers constantly increasing to our Facebook site as well as the live viewers. That itself indicates that you all are happy with the way we are conducting our webinars. So, normally we choose the webinar topics based on the requests we get from you all. So, in the same way, we have chosen this topic by an eminent speaker, Dr. G. Padmanabha Kumar, who will be doing this lecture today. Dr. G. Padmanabha Kumar is a consultant in oral and maxillofacial surgery. He is currently working in Masa University. He is, I think, all the alumni and students watching there, you all know that he has been with Masa University for long, and he has contributed tremendously for Faculty of Dentistry. He completed both his undergraduate and post-graduation in oral maxillofacial surgery from the Tamil Nadu government at Dr. MGR Medical University. He received his MFDS RCPS from Faculty of Dentistry, Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons from Glasgow, and completed his fellowship and master's in advanced surgical implantology from Bangalore, India. He has 22 years of general dental practice experience and also more than 11 years in specialty practice. He started teaching in 1999 and served as lecturer for nearly 7 years in Department of Conservative Dentistry in Ragas Dental College and Hospital, and then as senior lecturer for 4 years in Department of Oral and Maxillofacial Surgery in Thai Mugambiga Dental College and Hospital before joining Masa University. He held various administrative posts and in his career and is currently the coordinator for DDS Year 3, liaising with General Medicine Department and General Surgery Department at GHKL. His interest in orthognathic surgery, maxillofacial oncology, and advanced surgical implantology. He is also active in research and has published a lot of articles. For example, he has done studies on autologous bone grafts for implants in Resorb alveolar ridge. Currently, he is researching on oral oncology and few other related fields, both as principal investigator and co-investigator. He has presented many papers at both national and international conferences and published in index journals. In Masa University, he is also actively involved in conducting workshops on oral biopsy, oral cancer detection, and minor oral surgical procedures. So, with this impressive CV, let me present you all Dr. G. Padmanabha Kumar to deliver this lecture for benefit of all of you. Thank you very much, Dr. G. Padmanabha Kumar. I will be sharing your screen. Then you will have your screen to play with. You can talk a few words before you can start. Why you want to do this lecture, Dr. Kumar?
As you said, this is the most common demand from the general practitioners and the young budding dentists, especially my old students who just passed out and who were in the initial practice. They have the doubts and they usually call me and ask me some small tips. So then we thought this is a most common topic from oral surgery point of view for the general practitioners and especially for the young budding dentists. That is why we choose this topic.
Thank you, Dr. Kumar. I think thank you very much for contributing for this webinar series, and we are happy to have you here. You can see a lot of people are waiting for you already. You can actually start presenting your seminar, your lecture.
Thank you. Is the screen full?
No, you go to the PowerPoint. Just open the show.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Thanks, Dr. Kranti, for a wonderful introduction. Hi, Hal. Welcome to this webinar. Hope you're all safe and doing well in this pandemic situation. And today, the topic for today's webinar is essential tips for surgical removal of impacted mandibular third molars. And this is Dr. Kumar from Masa University. And I'm proud to say that Masa University is one of the biggest and best private university in Malaysia. And of course, I'm proud to be associated with Faculty of Dentistry, which is one of the best private faculty with well equipped with state-of-art facilities in dentistry. Let's go into the topic. So today we will see some essential tips. What are the essential tips required for minor oral surgery for surgical removal of impacted third molars? We all know that there's no shortcut for success, right? Similarly, in surgery, we have got certain protocols or SOPs which has to be followed step by step. If you ignore or if you skip some steps, you will end up in trouble. So we have to follow step by step all the protocol so that you will not miss any steps and you will not land up in problems and patient will not get any complications and the outcome of the surgery will be good. The steps in minor oral surgery for mandibular impacted third molar includes the clinical examination. It starts from the history taking, the clinical examination, assessment of the radiographs, and difficulty prediction. How difficult is the tooth going to be removed? How difficult is going to be the procedure? And explain to the patient. You have to get the consent form signed and pre-surgical planning, armamentarium setup for the surgery, and preparation of the patient for the surgery and the procedure, and post-op instructions and medications, and of course, a follow-up on suture removal. If there's any complications, how to prevent and how to manage it. These are the steps which are generally followed in minor oral surgery, and these are the topics which I'm going to cover in today's webinar. We will see why it is indicated to remove and what are the contraindications and when to remove this and how to select the case, especially for general practitioners or for the young budding dentists. Selection of the case is very important so that you should not land up in trouble. And the limitations for the general practitioners in doing minor oral surgical procedures and when to refer to specialists like maxillofacial surgeons. Before going to the topic, let us go to the definition which we studied in our dental schools. What is an impaction? Dental impaction it can be completely impacted, partially impacted, or fully erupted, but not to normal occlusal height. We should remember this. The tooth can be fully erupted. You can see all the four cusps, but it has not reached the occlusal level of adjacent 7 and 6. So a tooth can be fully impacted or partially erupted, or it is fully erupted but not reached the normal occlusal height beyond its chronological date of eruption, time of eruption. That's more important. A tooth can be unerupted. A tooth is called as unerupted if it is not erupted within that chronological age. If it is not erupted beyond the chronological time of eruption, we can call it as impacted. So the thing is, you should treat the patient. You should not create a patient. That's more important. So all the patients who are coming to you with complaints not necessarily requires surgery. So we should treat the patient. Do not create a patient. A strong indication to remove the impacted mandibular third molar should be complemented with a strong contraindication to its retention, which means you should weigh the contraindications and indications, and you should see the risks and benefits of the surgery, and we should decide whether we have to really go for surgery or not. As I said, not all the impacted teeth needs surgery, unless until it is indicated because of any underlying pathology. The relative risk of retaining or delaying removal of impacted third molar should be considered in all cases except any pathological conditions. The eyes does not see what the mind does not know. There's a famous saying, eyes does not see what the mind does not know, and the ants does not follow if the eyes doesn't see what the mind does not know. So a basic knowledge about anatomy and radiographic interpretation is important for all the surgeons to, and of course the surgical skill and the surgical knowledge technique, all these things are important for better outcomes. So brief anatomy. We all know the retromolar space, the retromolar area is surrounded by muscles of mastication, which includes the buccinator anteriorly, the temporalis distally, masseter laterally, and medial pterygoid and amylohyoid medially present. And the nerves, on the nerves and vessels, you know, that is a facial artery and facial vein anterior to the mesenteric muscle present. And you all know that the lower arch is supplied by the inferior alveolar nerve branch of a mandibular nerve. And you know the lingual nerve is just going lingual to the lingual cortex of the lower arch. And this slide is very important. You can see in this slide the relationship of the lingual nerve to the lingual cortex. You can see here the relationship of the lingual nerve from the cervical margin of the lingual surface of the molars. It is about 2.28 to 8.3 millimeters down to the inferiorly placed from the cervical margin. So this has to be taken into consideration. The lingual nerve is placed 2.28 to 8.3 millimeters inferiorly on the lingual surface of the lingual cortex of the molars. And similarly, if you see the width, it is around 0.58 to 3.4 millimeters away from the lingual cortex. So it is almost close to the lingual cortex. So we have to be very cautious when doing or performing minor oral surgery. Preoperative evaluation. So preoperative evaluation starts from the chief complaint, listening to the chief complaint of the patient. Patient's history has to be taken into consideration, clinical examination, all these things. So when you come to the medical history, most important thing is if the patient is already having any existing problems like cardiovascular disorders, or patient is having any bleeding disorders, patient has a history of recent chemotherapy or radiotherapy, whether the patient is on any blood thinners, patient is having any drug allergy, or if the female patient is pregnant or not. All these things has to be taken into consideration before planning for a surgery. Especially, we surgeons are more concerned about the bleeding. So, if the patient gives history of cardiovascular problems or recent history of microvascular prosthetic valve replacement or a knee joint replacement surgeries, anything, we should think about their drugs. What are the drugs they're taking? Most of the patients will be on blood thinners. So we have to think about that. If the patient gives history of taking blood thinners like aspirin, clopidogrel, or warfarin, or heparin, or any novel oral anticoagulants, we should think about INR. What is INR? INR is the international normalized ratio. It is an international standard for prothrombin time. It is a ratio of patient's prothrombin time to standard prothrombin time. The recommended INR according to the American College of Chest Physicians, for any oral surgical procedures is between 2 to 3. This is most important. You should keep this in mind. The recommended INR for any oral surgical procedures is between 2 to 3. So patients will be on different types of blood thinners. Some patients will be on aspirin alone. Some patients will be on clopidogrel alone, especially patients with recent history of stroke. They will be on clopidogrel monotherapy. And some patients will be on dual antiplatelet drugs like aspirin plus clopidogrel, especially patients with history of acute coronary diseases, syndromes. They will be on aspirin and clopidogrel. Some patients will be on warfarin. Some patients will be on novel oral anticoagulants, otherwise called as target-specific oral anticoagulants, and some patients will be on injectable anticoagulants like heparin. So what to do? How to deal with these patients? These patients too will have some problems in the oral cavity. They too will come with problems of chief complaints of pain in the third molar region. But still, we have to treat them right. So how to manage these patients? If the patient is on aspirin or on dual antiplatelet coagulants, we don't have to stop these drugs. Provided if you're so well conscious about this, you can check INR. If the patient is on warfarin, there are different strategies. Some doctors they stop warfarin 2 to 3 days before. Some doctors they reduce the dosage, and some doctors they just continue the warfarin. And some people they go for replacing with anticoagulation heparin, which is anticoagulation bridge therapy. But you should keep this in mind. If you stop or suspend warfarin, it may be responsible for development of cerebrovascular accidents. So you cannot blindly stop warfarin. You should check the patient's INR. If the patient's INR is unstable or more than 3 or 4, better don't touch the patient. Patient's INR should be within 2 to 3. So within 24 hours before surgery, do the INR test, and if it is between 2 to 3, you can perform surgery. Otherwise, best is you have a communication with the patient's physician, discuss with the patient, with the doctor, and decide about the treatment plan. So recommendations for patients on novel oral anticoagulants. Novel oral anticoagulants are the recently introduced anticoagulants like dabigatran, epicaxaban, rivaroxaban. All these drugs are in the market in some countries. So patients who are under novel oral anticoagulants, what we have to do is, generally, if they're taking in the morning, you can advise them to skip the dosage in the morning, and you can perform the surgery. You always, for blood thinner patients, better to fix appointments in the morning. So they can be the first patients, so that we can monitor them and we can discharge them after the complete hemostasis is achieved. So in patients with novel oral anticoagulants, what we can do is, you can advise them to skip the morning dosage, and you can advise them to take in the evening at least 4 hours after the surgery. That's more important. Next is the preoperative evaluation. So preoperatively, you have to assess the patient just like for any routine examination, dental examinations, like extraoral signs of any inflammatory swellings or redness, lymph node enlargements in the neck, and then you can go for intraoral examinations. Intraoral examination, the most important thing is the mouth opening. Amount of mouth opening is very important, whether the patient is having any restricted mouth opening or any trismus, and with the condition of the first and second molar, is there any distal caries, or all these things has to be taken, and the amount of space present between the distal surface of second molar and the ascending ramus. This is more important. The amount of space present between the distal surface of second molar and the ascending border of the ramus. Okay, and the size of the tongue. The size of the tongue is basically very important, because if the size of the tongue is too large, macroblastic patients, that will be very they will be very uncooperative, or it will be disturbing, and it can land up in injury to the tongue. So you should be very cautious when the patient is having a large sized tongue. Radiographic assessment. So after clinical examination and history taking, you go for radiographic assessment. What will you assess in the radiographs? We have to see the amount of space present in the retromolar area, that is, the amount of space present from the distal surface of the second molar and the ascending border of the ramus, and then the type of angulation of the tooth in relation to the adjacent second molar, the curvature of the roots, whether the roots are fused, dilacerated, or it is against the path of exit or not. And also the most important thing is the relationship of the root apex to the inferior alveolar nerve canal. This is more important. Always on a radiograph, we should see the relationship of the root apex to the inferior alveolar nerve canal. You can take intraoral radiographs if the patient is very cooperative, patient is not having any gag reflex, and if a radiographer is able to take a good radiograph, intraoral radiograph, you can go with an intraoral radiograph where you can see 6 and 7 and 8 together with a good anatomy, with a good position of the inferior nerve. If these features are not complete or incomplete in the radiograph, then you can go for extraoral radiographs like OPG, which will give a better view for about the impacted tooth. What will you see in the radiograph? So you can see what are the things you have to interpret in the radiograph. The most important thing you have to see is the type of impaction, whether the root is completely formed or not. That's more important. If the roots are not completely formed, and if the patient is a younger age patient, you don't have to go for surgical removal. That's more important point. And what are the things you will see in the radiographic interpretation is the type of impaction, whether the tooth is mesoangularly impacted, distoangularly impacted, horizontal or vertical. All these things you can see in the radiograph, and the position and depth of the borderlines, which I will talk later. Existing any underlying periopical pathology and dental caries in the molars, and presence of any pockets, periodontal problems, any amount of bone loss, and you can see all these things. And about the roots, you can see the root pattern, path of withdrawal, any follicles, the size of the follicles, and you can also see the relationship of the root to the canal. All these things can be interpreted in the radiograph. So like this, you can see the mesoangular impact, the angulation of the impacted tooth, the relationship of the nerve to the root apex, periapical pathology of the adjacent tooth, or is there any follicular space. All these things can be assessed in the radiograph. Okay, suppose in some cases you can see like this, there will be interruption of the inferior nerve canal because of the apex of the tooth. What will you do? There are some conditions where you will see in the X-ray different types of features like this, where there will be darkening of the root, there will be some deflection, there will be narrowing of the root, there will be dark and bifid apex of the roots, sometimes interruption of white line on the canal, diversion of the canal, or narrowing of the canal. All these things indicate that there is a strong relationship or impingement of the apex of the root on the nerves. So you have to be very careful when selecting these type of cases. It's better to, for the young practitioners, it's better to avoid such type of cases or refer to the senior practitioners or to the specialists, so that you will not land up in problem. So when there is a darkening of the shaders of this, that will indicate that the root is, that the canal is going, the nerve is going buccal to the roots. Okay, so you will not be able to get all the things in the radiograph, right? So do we have to go for CBCT? Yes, because the different views give different perceptions, and two-dimensionally the radiograph gives only two-dimensional view. So we are not able to see three-dimensionally the anatomical position of the tooth, the relationship of the tooth to the nerve. So what you can do is you can go for CBCT. Yes, even though CBCT is not the first option, if you feel that the root is impinging on the nerve in the OPG, you can go for CBCT. And with the CBCT, you can interpret the bone density, the relationship of the nerve to the tooth, and it also helps in planning. It also helps the surgeons to plan with a different technique, like sectioning of the tooth or minimizing buccal osteotomy or just restricting to coronectomy. So the CBCT helps you, it gives a clear idea whether the nerve is going buccally or lingually, or in between the roots it is transversing or not. So thus the CBCT helps you to plan according to the relationship of the nerve to the root apex, whether to go for the complete removal or only for the partial removal like coronectomy. Difficulty prediction. So I like this picture very much because you see here, sometimes in the extraction OP, we see that the patient comes at the last minute of the OP before just closing the OP. Sometimes we see that we feel it's easy to remove the tooth, but we'll end up in trouble. Sometimes we feel the tooth is going to be difficult, but it comes out easily. So for the surgeons, for the dental surgeons, sometimes it is unpredictable. Similarly, for the third molars, sometimes it's difficult to predict, but there are some difficult prediction indices which we can follow. The first thing is war lines. We have heard about, I think I'm confident that you all have heard about this war lines. W stands for white line, A for amber, and R for red line. The white line is drawn on the occlusal surfaces of the 6, 7, and 8 and extended to the ascending border of the ramus. The amber line is drawn at the cervical margin of the cervical crest of the 6, 7, and 8 and extended to the cervical margin. And the red line is drawn perpendicular to the amber line to a point of imaginary point of application of the elevator. Okay, so got different types of things you can see here. So the inference is the white line indicates the inclination or angulation of the impacted tooth. The amber line indicates the amount of bone covering the tooth, impacted tooth, and the red line indicates the amount of difficulty encountered in removal of the tooth. So you can see here, if the white line is converging, that means converging with the occlusal surface of the tooth, it is mesioangular. If the white line is diverging, it is mesioangular. If the white line is converging with the occlusal surface of the tooth, impacted tooth, it is distoangular. If the white line is perpendicular to the impacted tooth, it is horizontal, and if the white line is parallel to the occlusal surface, it is vertically impacted tooth. And what is the significance of red line? The red line, the amount of the length of the line determines whether the procedure is going to be difficult, moderate, or HC. If the length of the red line is less than 5 mm, the removal is easy. Every additional millimeter increases 3 times of difficulty. Keep this in mind. If the length of the red line is more than 5 mm, it is going to be difficult. If it is more than 9 mm, it is better to plan the procedure under general anesthesia. There is one more classification called as Pell-Gregory, which mentions about the amount of space present from the distal surface of the second molar to the ascending border of the ramus, and the position of the tooth in relation to the occlusal surface of the adjacent teeth. Okay, so the class 1 and position A are supposed to be easier, and the class 3 and position C, where the tooth is completely buried and there is lack of space for the tooth to come out, are the difficult cases to be performed. The other classification includes the Whorf assessment. The Whorf assessment is nothing but the Winter's classification, where the angulation is based upon angulations and the height of the mandible, angulation of the third molar, root shape, follicle size, and path of exit. All these factors are taken into considerations, and depending upon the score, it is minimally difficult or moderately difficult or very difficult. Minimum the score, it is minimally difficult. Higher the score, it is highly difficult. The third molar decision matrix. whether to go for surgery or not. It depends upon so many factors. It is not only your prediction fact. It is not only based upon your clinical examination, radiographic interpretation, and prediction. It also depends upon so many factors like surgical difficulty, possible risk of complications, the current health status of the patient, future health, what will happen to the patient after the procedure if the patient is under so many medications for the existing problems, and the social support, whether the patient is staying alone, or patient is having support from the family or not, the financial support from the patient, and of course, finally, the decision of the patient. Patient should decide on his own whether to go for procedure or not, irrespective of the severity of the problem. So the factors that make surgery less difficult is the mesioangular impaction, the class 1 ramus, where class 1 ramus means the amount of space available for the impacted tooth is more than the size of the crown of the impacted tooth. Class A is, again, the tooth is almost at the occlusal surface of the adjacent 7. Roots are incomplete or fused conical roots, wider periodontal space, elastic bone, separated from the second molar. There is no lock between the second molar and the third molar, and there's a complete distance. There's some amount of bone present between the apex of the roots and the inferior dental nerve. And of course, if it's a soft tissue impaction, it's going to be very easy. So all these factors makes it very easy, and young practitioners can select cases like this to start with your practice. Factors that make surgery more difficult are the distangular impaction, of course, horizontal impaction too, class 3 ramus or position C depth, which means the tooth is totally buried in the bone, and long thin roots or divergent roots, or the roots curved against the path of exit, and dense inelastic bone contact with the second molar, where the molar is completely buried under the cervical margin of the second molars and close to inferior dental nerve, and completely bony impaction. All these things are factors which makes the surgery to be difficult. What are the other factors which makes the surgery difficult? The removal of third molar difficult. The patient factors, like obese patients. Obese patients, they will have a big cheek. They will not be able to open the mouth completely, and there will be sagging of the cheek. Because of that, there will be disturbance while surgery. Large tongue, frequently disturbing or causing injury to the lung, tongue. Strong gag reflex. Frequently, patient develops gag reflex that will be interrupting the procedure. Advanced age, of course. Fractious patients, you have to be very careful with fractious patients who will be troublesome for you. And then atropic mandible and limited surgical access, that is restricted mouth opening. All these are the other factors from the patient point which will be difficult for us to operate. Indications. Why to remove the impacted tooth? If the patient is having pericoronitis, recurrent pericoronitis. If the patient comes to you the first time you're diagnosing as a pericoronitis, maybe you can start with the conservative management with medications and oral mouthwash, all these things. If the patient comes into recurrent pericoronitis and there is no space for the tooth to come out, then you can plan for impacted tooth, deep periodontal pockets, impacted tooth causing problems to the adjacent tooth, like because of food impaction, causing distal caries in the 7. All these things can be considerations, and underlying any pathology, and even before orthodontic surgery also, you can go for BSS. Even you can go for removal of the tooth before BSS. So what will happen if you neglect removal of the tooth with pathology, with problems? What will happen is there will be some cystic like periapical changes, internal resorptions, periodontal problems will increase, and caries and resorptions, and all these problems will continue which will cause more problems to the patient. Prophylactic removal. I am totally against this prophylactic removal. There's a nice guidelines that is in 2000 by the National Institute of Health and Care Excellence. There's a guidance for extraction of wisdom tooth. This guidance stressed that the discontinuation of prophylactic surgical removal of pathology-free impacted teeth. That means if the patient is not having any underlying pathology in the impacted tooth region, you don't have to go for removal. There's nothing called as prophylactic removal. You can wait and observe. Why not to remove the tooth? What are the contraindications to remove the impacted tooth? Extreme age of the patient, poor health status of the patient, and risk-based benefits. You should always think about the risk-based benefits. And maybe the patient had a recent radiotherapy or a chemotherapy, teeth in close proximity to the tumor or the nerve, uncontrolled diabetes, a pregnant lady, full-term pregnant lady, patients on blood thinners, and underlying bleeding disorders. All these things are relative contraindications for surgery. So If the third molar is indicated according to your clinical examination radiographic interpretation, we have to decide whether it is indicated or not. If it is not indicated, no need to go for surgical intervention. If it is indicated, take a OPG, assess it. If there's a low risk, go for surgical removal. If there's a high risk, which means if the root apex is close to the inferior nerve, then you can go for a CBCT. Do the assessment. Again, if it is a high risk, where is that's involving the pulp, the case is involving the pulp, you can go for surgical removal. And if there's no pulpal involvement, you can just go for a coronectomy. So now the patient preparation. So you're assessed, you've done the clinical examination, history taking, radiographic assessment, you've done the difficulty prediction assessment, everything, and next is the patient preparation. The most important thing is written consent. Explain to the patient about the procedure. Explain to the patient clearly what you are going to do, why we are going to do, how we are going to do. That is very important, because some patients will not be able to catch what all the points you're telling to the patients. So you can repeat the points twice or thrice. So explain to the patient why you are going to do, what you are going to do, how we are going to do. And more important thing is explain to the patient about the possible post-operative complications. That's more important. You have to explain to the patient about the most possible complications, maybe in a lighter vein, not to fear the patient, just you have to give a knowledge about the possible complications. So obtain a written consent. Oral consent is not medically legally accepted. Obtain a written consent. And then prepare the patient. So you can use the surgical scrubs like povidone iodine, which is the best scrub. You can use it 7.5% povidone iodine for the skin scrub, that is extraoral scrub, and oral rinse of povidone iodine, 2% povidone iodine for oral rinse. The 2% povidone iodine oral rinse might cause irritation to the patients. So what you can do is immediately after oral rinse with the povidone iodine, you can irrigate the patient's mouth with saline, normal saline. Drape the patient, expose the patient's face as much as possible, especially the oral cavity, and it should not be so tight when the patient opens the mouth, they should not be feel the discomfort. The effective light and assistance is equally important. Light should be positioned in such a way that it is not disturbing the surgeon, not disturbing the assistant is not blocking the light, and it is not disturbing to the patient's eyes. So it should be planned in such a way that light should be focused, and the assistance is equally important. The assistant should follow the surgeon's mind, and you should be able to give the instruments what is required next. Okay. After the patient preparation, what are the steps involved in surgical removal? The steps involved in surgical removal are injection. First is local anesthesia injection. You give a block. What block you give? You go for an inferior alveolar nerve block. We block the inferior alveolar nerve, lingual nerve, and long buccal nerve block. Generally, we use 2% mepivacaine or lignocaine with adrenaline. One cartridge is enough. Suppose in some conditions we may have to go for 2 cartridges, but restrict with the maximum dosage. Okay. Followed by anesthesia. If the anesthesia followed by the local anesthetic injection, after anesthesia is achieved, you go for incision and mucoperiosteal flap reflection. Anesthesia, local anesthesia includes your topical application of anesthesia and then injections. So don't go for injections. You apply topical anesthesia so that the mucosal layer gets anesthetized. Then you go for local anesthesia so that the patient will not feel the pain and patient will start cooperating to you. Incision and mucoperiosteal flap. Followed is the incision. What are the different types of incision? How to reflect the flap, and then how much bone to be removed, and then whether we have to go for sectioning of the tooth or to remove the tooth in total. Followed by wound debridement, wound closure, and post-operative follow-up. These are the steps involved in surgical removal of impacted third molar. Armamentarium. The armamentarium should not scare the patient. You should ensure the patient and give confidence to the patient that these armaments are the instruments kept in the tray, or all the instruments kept in the tray we are not going to use. Maybe we'll use it, but nothing to scare you. That is actually used, that is kept to make the procedure easy. So you should comfort the patient, give confidence to the patient. The instruments kept in the tray should not scare the patient, because the patient is on local anesthesia. The patient will be seeing the tray and they'll get fear. So the armamentarium setup. What are the instruments kept in the armamentarium? It should start with the examination set, your incision set, your periosteal elevators, and your bone file, your Roger, your bone scoop, your forceps, your elevators or luxators. Then I don't recommend chisel and mallet. Then you can go for suturing kit, and of course your micrometer handpiece or the straight with the handpiece and the burrs, surgical tip. You should have all these things in the proper thing. So examination set, examination kit, local anesthesia syringe and cartridge, BP blade, periosteal elevator, Howard elevators, cryers, and couplants, lower terminal forceps. Lower terminal forceps is better because it is more comfortable for you to easily remove the tooth. And you use a bone file, suturing kits, the gauze spaces, irrigating syringes, gully pot with povidone iodine, another gully pot for used gauzes, kidney tray for saline, and your retractors. The gauze pieces, I generally don't use dry gauzes. I generally soak the gauzes in the saline, squeeze it, and keep it so that the dry gauzes will have a loose pieces of gauzes which will not fall into the sockets. So I always wet the gauzes, squeeze it, and keep it for thing. Okay, we use number 15 blade, BP blade for surgeries. So you should be very careful while loading the blades into the handle and while removing the blades. You should have a proper firm grip over the BP blade handle. That's very important. Pen grasp, allow maximum control, and with the other hand, hold the tissues firmly. The freely movable loose tissue should be held firmly, retract firmly, and then with a firm grip, press down firmly with a single stroke. The mucosa as well as the periosteum should be incised together in a single stroke. It should be a mucoperiosteal incision, not a separate mucosal incision, not a separate periosteal incision. If you go for a separate 2 and 4 mucosal and periosteal incisions, you will end up in too much of bleeding, and healing also will be a problem. So you have to go for a single stroke, single incision with a mucoperiosteal flap. Next is the retraction of the mucoperiosteum. You can use the Mohs periosteal elevator and the Howard periosteal elevator, and sometimes some people use Mohs probe too. The short point of the Mohs periosteal elevator can be used to reflect the incisive papillas. First, reflect the incisive papilla, reflect around the tooth, then use the other blunt end of the other end of the Mohs periosteal elevator or the Howard periosteal elevator to reflect the mucoperiosteum from the bone. Next is the cheek retractor. So more important should be given to this. Generally, when you are focusing on the surgery here, we forget about the retraction. So what happens is too much of pressure with the retractor causes damage to the tissues in the corner of the mouth. So what you can do is, before retracting the tissues, you can apply a petroleum jelly over the lips, especially on the corner of the mouth, and you can retract the cheek with a gentle, the cheek retractor with a gentle pressure. Don't give too much of pressure. That's very important. Next is, you can use Austrian. The most commonly what we use the retractor is the Austrian retractor. Some people use Minnesota retractors or Baudelaire entry retractor. This Baudelaire entry retractor is commonly used. I prefer Baudelaire entry retractor because it is more comfortable to us to hold it and retract. It is not causing stress to your wrist too. And instruments for removing the bone, of course, your handpiece and your bus. You use a straight fissure bar or surgical round bore. Before starting the procedure, you ensure that the bar is going, but the handpiece is working properly. After incision, don't check it. So check before injection, before giving administration of LA, you check the handpiece is properly running, and you are having a control over the foot control or the hand control, whatever it is, you are having a control over the instrument, and the bus are properly sterilized or new bus are used. How much bone to be removed? So the most important thing you have to keep in mind is bone belongs to the patient. Bone belongs to the patient. That means we have to remove minimal bone. How much bone to be removed? We do a buccal cutting. We generally don't remove bone on the buccal side. What we have to do is we create a narrow passage between the buccal cortex and the buccal surface of the third molar. That means it's a buccal trough is formed. That is, buccal bone is gutted to the level just below the height of contour to gain access to the elevator. That is very important. How much height you're going? Just below the height of contour to gain access to the elevator. Excessive bone removal should be avoided and can be avoided by sectioning the tooth. We use the elevators like couplants, cryers, all these things. Warwick James, cryers, or apex elevators are used. And while you are using these elevators, you should be very cautious. You should have a firm control grip and control over the instruments. You can use the other finger so that even if it loosens, it doesn't cause injury to the patient. And never use the adjacent tooth as a fulcrum. You can use the internal bone as a fulcrum, but never use the adjacent tooth as a fulcrum. Don't use the buccal cortex as a fulcrum, and never use on the lingual side. And you can use a bone file after removal of the tooth. You can use a bone file for smoothing the sharp bony margins. When you're using the bone files, it should be a pull stroke. You should not use pull stroke, because push stroke causes burnishing and crushing of the bone. So it should be always in a pull stroke. For removing pathological tissues, you use a bone curex to remove any follicles, underlying granulation tissues, or to remove any unique cyst or any granulomas from the surgical site. And of course, the suturing armamentarium includes a needle holder, the tissue forceps, the scissors, all this, the suturing material, and the suturing needle, all these things. Now going to the surgical procedure. Incision. You start with incision, right? After retraction, going for incision. What type of incision? If it is a soft tissue incision, if it is a soft tissue impaction or a superficial impaction like position A, class 1 impaction, you can go for a triangular incision or an envelope incision. There are two types of incisions, generally called as Warts incision or modified Warts incision. Most of them prefer this Warts incision or modified Warts incision. If the tooth is deeply buried, you can go for, we need a wider access. If the teeth is deeply buried, we need a wider access, right? So you can go for a modified Warts incision where the incision is extended around the cervical margin of the second molar, and there's a vertical incision here, medial to the mesial to the second molar. In case of Warts incision, the incision, the vertical oblique down incision is just distal to the second molar. So in making the incisions, you should always keep this in mind. You should be very gentle, single stroke, firm stroke, and make a single stroke incision. Don't make a to and fro incisions. Okay, you should respect the tissues. That's more important. The lesser the trauma to the tissues while incision, the faster is the healing. Now, tooth sectioning and removal. So we have to remove minimum amount of bone, right? So what are the conditions where we can go for tooth sectioning and removal of the tooth? Even in a mesoangular impaction, when it is position B, that is where it is slightly buried inside, or position C where it is deeply buried, you can go for a sectioning of the tooth. So after buccal and distal trough, so what we do is you create a space between the buccal cortex and the third molar buccally, and you go a little bit distally. Don't go on the lingual side. Never go on the lingual side. Buccal and lingually. After the trough is created, you can try to elevate the tooth, or you can section the tooth, or you can make a purchase point. You can try to luxate and remove the tooth. Otherwise, you section after buccal trough, you can just section the distal portion of the crown and then try to move it mesially, slightly distally, and try to remove it out. Otherwise, you section the tooth. You section the tooth into two pieces: distal portion or the mesial portion. Remove the mesial off first, move the distal portion mesially, and try to push it out later. Push it out following the mesial portion. Otherwise, you can cut the crown first, remove it, bisect the roots, take the mesial root first, and then distal root second. For vertical impaction, just bisect the tooth. Bisect the tooth into two portions, mesial portion and the distal portions. Remove the mesial portion first and the distal portion later, or vice versa you can do. So you can see here, the tooth is impacted here. So after incision, the incision is made, bone is gutted, and using the couplants, you are trying to luxate the tooth. Using the elevator, the tooth is luxated. When you're luxating it, you should be more cautious that you are not injuring the tissues, and you should not cause any injury to the adjacent tissues. Before luxating the tooth, ensure that the lingual side, the tooth is detached from the attached gingiva. So after tooth is luxated, you can go for sutures. Before going for sutures, you have to irrigate the socket clearly. After removal of the tooth, you have to toilet the cavity. That means remove, using the bone scoop, remove whatever the granulation tissues or follicles present, or any remnants of the tooth pieces has to be removed. Copious amount of saline irrigation has to be done thoroughly so that you can see a fresh bleeding in the socket. After that, the sharp bony margins has to be smoothened with the bone file. Again, irrigate thoroughly. Then reapproximate the mucoperiostral flaps, and you can go for sutures. For distoangular impaction. So distoangular impaction, the point of application of the elevator is distobuccal. Theoretically, the point of application of the elevator is distobuccal. So what you can do is, since the distal cusp is buried in the bone, what you can do is you can slice the distal portion, expose the bone of the C junction. You can gutter the buccally and distally, then you can move it, take it out. Otherwise, you can cut the crown, remove the crown, slice it, take into pieces. So the horizontal impactions: cut the crown, cut the tooth into crown and root pieces. Remove the crown first. Split the roots. Remove this portion first, and the distal root later. So by sectioning the tooths, we are minimizing the amount of bone which we're going to remove. Okay, you see here the dotted lines indicates the wrong technique of cutting. If you make a cut like this, actually when you are holding the patient, when the patient is in the chair and you're trying to cut, the angulation will be like this. But you should not cut like this. If you cut like this, what happens is the cut portion is like this. So the superiorly it is a smaller portion, and inferiorly it is a larger portion. It is very difficult to remove this portion. So it should be in the other way. It should not be like this. It should be in the other way. You cut so that the upper portion is the larger portion, the lower portion is the smaller one. So it will be easy for you to remove it. Then you can cut it, dissect the roots, and you can remove it slowly. Reflect the flap. Crown is sectioned. 3 pieces removed totally. So horizontally impacted tooth, you can see here. Sorry. You can see this horizontally impacted tooth. Position A, class 1. So reflect the incision is made. Sorry. So there's a problem there. Dr. Kranti? I think there's some problem there.
Yeah, it's okay. You just close the window, close the video. Stop the video first.
No, is it? I'm not able to see here.
We are not able to see anything there. We are not able to see anything. It's a black screen.
So now I'll
again share. Yeah, again share the screen, please.
Yes.
Sorry for small technical glitch. It's okay. No problem. Again, you have to share. You have to close the window. I can't see the PowerPoint.
Now?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. You can continue.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry for the disturbance. There's a small technical error. Okay. Now coronectomy. This is the latest concept. In some countries, they encourage this. I encourage this for the students, especially if the roots are deeply buried. If the tooth is deeply buried and the roots are closely interrelated with the inferior nerve. So this is described by Pogretol. It is a technique of removing the crown of the tooth by raising a full thickness mucobristle. It's almost like the same procedure. We reflect the flap, raise the flap, but we don't remove the entire tooth. We just remove only the coronal portion is removed. The coronal portion is reduced, then is removed, then it is reduced with burst until the roots lie 3 mm below the alveolar bone and no enamel remains. Okay. So maybe after some time, once the root comes out, we can go for a second surgery. We can remove the root at a later stage. So this coronectomy can be done in cases where you are not confident, where the root apex are very close to the nerves. You can perform this procedure. So this is another case where incision is made. You make a incision here. This is a modified Watts incision is made. The tissues are reflected. The tissues are reflected with the periosteal elevator. And bone is gutted, sorry. Yeah, you can see here, copious amount of saline irrigation is done. The bone is gutted, a window is created here. The tooth is exposed and you are trying to luxate. Since the tooth is not coming out, we are sectioning the tooth. The crown is sectioned. Sectioned portion is removed. You can see the crown is only the crown portion is removed. The sectioned crown is removed. Now the roots are luxated. We are trying to luxate the root, and again, it's intact. So the roots are bisected. The roots are sectioned. When you're sectioning the crown or the root, the burr should not go to the lingual side. You can stop at the 2/4 of your cutting of your sectioning. Then you can use elevators to induce fracture of the crown or the tooth. After that, you can remove. You can see here the distal root has come out, and the mesial root is come out. The distal root is removed. After removal, you have to curate the socket. See, you can see lots of follicles or granulation tissues there. All these things has to be removed before going for closure. You can use a Hartree forceps and remove it, and then you can use a curette, and then you can remove. You can curate the socket. Then you can use a bone file to see the distal surface of the second molar is scaling is done in the distal surface, so that there will be no calculus or food impaction taking place. After that, you go for a closure of the flap. Okay, there's one more case here. The crown is sectioned. Make an incision. Incision is made. You can see there. The tooth is exposed, and you're doing a crown sectioning. The crown is sectioned. The sectioned crown using the couplings or the elevators. You can remove the sectioned portion. After that, the crown is sectioned, and we go for removal of the crown into pieces. So the C portion of the crown is removed. The C portion is vertically sectioned and it removed, and now the mesial portion is removed. After removal is the sutures. You can either go for resorbable sutures or non-resorbable sutures. It depends upon the patient's affordability, all these things, so many factors. And generally, we go for 3-0 silk or Vicryl 4-0 Vicryl or chromic AdKit 3-0. So the first, we can go for a two simple interpreter sutures or 3 simple interpreter sutures. The first one will be at the releasing incision. The second one will be at the wristobuccal incision. And if you want, you can go for a third incision. So this incision should be as close to the distance of the second molar, so that there will be no space here, so that there will be no pocket space, so that there will be food impaction will be prevented. So to prevent pocket formation in the distal surface of second molar, we should this second suture should be as close to the distal surface of second molar. This area is left unclosed because this lac is pain, so that swelling can be minimized and inflammation can be reduced. Inflammatory exudate can come out through this. Next is the post-op instructions. After the surgery, you have done the closure. Now you have to give post-operative instructions. Post-operative instructions are almost the same like what you give after routine dental extractions. What instructions you will give? Ask the patient to bite the gauze for 30 minutes to 1 hour. You observe the patient, especially if the patient gives history of bleeding disorders, or if the patient is on blood thinners, don't discharge the patient immediately. You observe the patient in your clinic till the hemostasis is achieved. You should not discharge the patient. Only after hemostasis is achieved, you can discharge the patient. What are the instructions you'll give to the patients? So ask the patient to bite the gauze and observe the patient. If still there's a oozing of blood out, again you can replace the gauze and observe the patient for another 15-20 minutes. Then advise the patient to strictly avoid smoking and drinking alcohol for 1 week better. Okay, at least for a few days. And no hot and spicy food, no solid food on the day of procedure, and liquid food on the day of procedure, which should not be hot, which should not be spicy. And the patient can start gargling or using a mouthwash from the next day. And patient, you make the patient, you inform the patient that patient might develop a swelling, nothing to worry, and patient may be having difficulty in opening the mouth, trismus, nothing to worry, and advise the patient to keep the mouth clean. That's very important. After every meals, before and after meals, patient should have a gentle goggling of the oral cavity so that the food should not get stuck in the sutured areas. And then mouth opening exercise. You can advise the patient to do mouth opening exercise, minimal mouth opening exercise, at least a finger width on the first day or second day. From the second day, you start the mouth opening exercise. The normal mouth opening is a three finger mouth width, 3 finger width. So advise the patient to have 1 finger, 2 finger. So like slowly open and close. Otherwise, the patient can use a ice cream sticks and open the mouth and close the mouth. Then you can advise the patient to take medications, and if there's no pain, the patient can stop the medications, especially the painkillers. Pre-op medications. Do we have to go for pre-op medications? Antibiotics, dexamethasone? We'll see. Analgesics and anti-inflammatory. Some people prefer and recommend preoperative analgesics, especially if you give 30 minutes before the procedure, like ibuprofen 400 milligrams, which has got a maximum peak value. After 30 minutes, you can start with the 30 minutes before. We can start giving ibuprofen before the procedure, and you can start the procedure. Moreover, the prostaglandin concentration is maximum at the surgical site after injury after 1 hour. So you can give preoperative analgesics. Also, the anesthesia will be effective only for 1 hour. Okay, before the anesthesia wears, you should give analgesics so that the patient is not feeling any pain. So what are the drugs generally given? You can give ibuprofen, mefenamic acid, paracetamol. But if the patient is on blood thinners, don't give mefenamic acid, don't give diclofenac, don't give naproxen. Antibiotics. Do we need to give antibiotics? I'm totally against antibiotics, which means I don't give antibiotics for all the patients. I give antibiotics only for immunocompromised patients, or if the procedure is extended for a longer duration, you can give for antibiotics. Our Ministry of Health, there are some articles which are against for antibiotics. Generally, there's no benefit from the prophylactic antibiotics. The Ministry of Health Malaysia has given some guidelines. The recommendation 1 is antibiotic prophylaxis is indicated for all surgical procedures if carried out on a medically compromised patient. If the patient is a diabetic patient, if the patient is a renal failure patient, or any other patient with many other medical problems, you give antibiotic coverage. Antibiotic prophylaxis is given in case of cardiac problem patients. Recommendation 2 is it is not indicated for healthy patients. It is not indicated for lower terminal surgeries. It is not indicated for all minor oral surgical procedures. It is indicated only if the patient is having medical problems or if the patient is an immunocompromised patient. It is also indicated, antibiotics is also indicated if the procedure is for a difficult condition, or it's a difficult procedure, or if it is a time-consuming procedure. And note that antibiotic prophylaxis is indicated for surgery to all dental implant patients. So the antibiotic choice is amoxicillin, clindamycin, all these things. If the patient is on blood thinners, you can better give clindamycin, and you can avoid amoxicillin, which interface with INR. And parenteral, you can give clindamycin, amoxicillin, cloxacillin, or cephaloxacin or cefuroxime. So what are the factors influencing complications? It is not only your technique, it is not only the difficulty, it is not only the patient's medical history. There are so many factors which influences the complications, right from the age of the patient, gender of the patients, the medical history, the relationship of the nerve to the tooth, so many factors. Dry socket is more common in female patients who are under oral contraceptives. And of course, it depends upon the surgical technique and the surgeon's experience. The complications can be intra-op complications or post-op complications. The post-op complications can be immediate or delayed complications. What are the common intraoperative complications? Intraoperative complication is bleeding, uncontrolled bleeding. The bleeding can be from the capillaries, the bleeding can be from the arteries, or it can be from the veins. If it is just oozing out, it is bright red, it can be from the arteries. If it is a dark red, it can be from the veins. If it is slow and oozing out slowly, it can be from the capillaries. Okay. And the reason can be because of the causes can be local causes, iatrogenic causes, or it can be in patient's inherited causes. Okay, so whatever it is, we have to check for that, and we have to give local hemostatic measures. You can apply pressure packs, or you can use so many other things. Sorry, you can use a local gauze, a gel foam, or surgical into the socket. You can apply hemostatic agents, and you can control the bleeding. If there's a bleeding from the bone, you can apply bone wax. Sometimes, unexpectedly, this should not happen to anyone. Sometimes there will be massive intraoperative bleeding, which is a rare occurrence and can be secondary to the mandibular arteriovenous malformation. It can be either low flow because of venous, or it can be high flow because of arterial. Okay, so generally there will be multilocal radiology on the radiographs, or sometimes it is not insignificant or non-apparent. But we should be very cautious if you suspect there's a malformation, arteriovenous malformation. You should not touch the patient, and you refer the patient to the tertiary care centers. As a local hemostatic measures, you can use some local hemostatic agents into the socket. You can keep into the socket, pack the socket with the local hemostatic agents, and over that you can apply a gauze, ask the patient to bite, Once the hemostasis is achieved, you can discharge the patient. These are the different types of local hemostatic agents like Gelfoam, Surgicel, Colatape, Colaplug, Thrombin, Tissel. All these things are commercially available in the market. These are the local hemostatic agents which I recommend all the people to keep in the clinic. At least 1 or 2 types can be kept in the clinics, should be kept in the clinics. Post-op bleeding. So bleeding should be observed. Post-op bleeding can be delayed or immediate. So it should be observed in the clinic. You should observe whether the patient is having bleeding or not periodically, 10 minutes after surgery, 30 minutes after surgery, after 60 minutes. If there's no bleeding, hemostasis is achieved completely, you can discharge the patient. The other intraoperative complications are the soft tissue injuries. Most of us, especially over enthusiastically, we focus, especially the young students or the young dental surgeons, we focus on the surgical site. We forget about the adjacent surrounding tissues. The most sensitive tissue for the patient from the patient's point is the lips. You should not cause injury to the patient's lips. What happens is either your retraction is wrong, or when you're trying to focus on bone sectioning or tooth sectioning in the surgical site, the heat generated by the burr or the burr rotations causes lip injuries, or sometimes to the tongue. So these things has to be taken into consideration, and these things has to be and should be avoided. Sometimes excessive force can result in angle fractures. Angle fractures, according to me, is the iatrogenic cause. So this should be definitely avoided. And if there is an angle fracture, inform the patient, refer the patient to the maxillofacial surgeons, and they will do surgery. So the post-op complications can be pain, severe pain, mild, moderate, severe pain, depends upon the patient's threshold, all these things. Swelling, again, severe, moderate, mild, trismus, bleeding, dry sockets. So dry socket is the most common complication, especially in the female patients, younger age female patients who are under local oral contraceptives. So dry socket is nothing but it is a displacement of the blood clot. There will be severe throbbing pain. Patient will have halitosis. Usually starts 48 hours after surgery, third or fourth post-operative day. What you can do is you can irrigate it gently. Don't cure it. You can irrigate thoroughly. Placement of an optimum zinc oxide eugenol dressing, and you can change it alternative days or daily until the patient revives from this condition. So my take-home message for today is a good proper radiological interpretation is very important. A good clinical correlation with the radiographs, clinical examination, good correlation of the clinical history and the examination and the radiographic interpretation, good setup of armamentarium with a good assistant, and of course, such good knowledge and surgical skill and technique. We do conduct some workshops for manual surgical procedures and so on patients. We do annually. So for the local people who are interested, the young dentists or alumni from MASA who are interested can follow us in Facebook or can follow us in alumni groups or contact us for the next workshop. And I take this opportunity to sincerely acknowledge and thank my dean, my deputy deans, my faculty fellow colleagues, and my students and friends and management for giving me this wonderful platform. And last not least, thanks to my wife and my kids for maintaining pin drop silence for this 1 hour. Last but not least, again, thanks to all viewers who are patiently sitting and watching me live on this Facebook. Thanks to Facebook for this platform. So stay safe, stay protective, keep yourself healthy. Have a nice day. Thank you.
Yeah, Dr. Kumar. Okay, can you just you can. Sorry. Yeah, thank you. Wonderful presentation. We had a very high number of live viewers. We touched around 600 maximum.
Thank you.
I think it is it's a very, very big hit topic. I think a lot of people are waiting for our this particular lecture, and we have got quite a number of questions ready for you. So we will be looking at few of them. Don't worry if we cannot answer all the questions due to time constraints. Definitely, Dr. Kumar will go into Facebook and answer all your queries in the MASA Facebook page.
I'll follow the Facebook, so I'll try to answer all the questions. If not able to, because of the time, I'll not be able to answer all the questions. Maybe the Facebook later I will answer.
That's wonderful. So we will take few questions, Dr. Kumar. We have got few questions, and we will take them. Okay, the first question for today is, Okay, this is from Dr. Wong Hong Zhang. What medication would doctor consider to safely give for patients with pain on the various types of anticoagulants?
Yeah, as I mentioned in my previous slides, you try to avoid naproxen, diclofenac. Other drugs you can give. Brufen also you can avoid.
Okay.
So only you give mefenamic acid. Thanks for the question, Dr. Wang Zhang. Hope you are doing well.
There was some small technical glitch. It's okay. The next question was, most of the general dentists will miss the war line, so the complication begins there. I think it's a passing comment.
Yeah. Dr. Pradeep, thanks for your comments. Yeah, you're true, because we too are sometimes a little lazy, or we are too overconfident of the procedures, so we go. So my advice for the young budding practitioners is to follow the protocol. You always have the habit of doing waterline, at least waterlines. If you're not going for a CBCT, at least you do waterline predictions, which will give you confidence whether to touch the patient or not. So waterline prediction, waterline tracing is good for young practicing surgeons.
What precautions should we observe for in pregnant patients which require emergency removal, and should we proceed with the surgery? Dr. Christopher is asking.
Dr. Christopher, thank you for the question. I didn't cover that in the topic actually. So we all know the first trimester and third trimester, we don't touch the patients for extractions or any surgery, right? We do mostly in the second trimester. We don't touch the patient in the first trimester or in the third trimester. But sometimes, even in the third trimester, I have done surgery for the patients just 2 days before the delivery of the delivery. So what you can do is, if it is very severe, we have to do that. So what you can do is you can get the opinion from the gynecologist, and based upon that you can do procedures, and you can try to avoid some medications, some antibiotics. Like amoxicillin you can avoid ibuprofen, you can just give paracetamol, you can try to maintain, and you can advise the patient to follow strict oral post-operative instructions. But my advice for young practitioners is, if it's a full-term pregnant lady, better refer the patient to a centers, not in the private clinics.
I think that's a valid point, Dr. Kumar, you mentioned. I think it's better to refer to hospital setups or big setups where any emergencies, they can manage it very effectively. The next question from Dr. Dimple: if patient have jaw dislocation problem and requires removal of third molar, can it be done under local anesthesia, or it's better to do under general anesthesia?
Yeah. So thanks for the question, Dr. Dimple. It's a good question. If the patient is already having a TMJ disorders or internal derangements, those patients will definitely have worse problems after surgery under local anesthesia. So my suggestion is better to go for under general anesthesia for such patients. Local anesthesia is you make the patient to keep the mouth wide open and keep under stress for longer duration. So that will worsen the problem for the patients. Otherwise, if it is a minor problem based upon the Wilkinson's classification, there are different types of stages of internal derangements. If it is very mild, you can give the mouth prop on the other side so that the patient does not have stress, and you can do the procedure.
Okay, thank you, doctor. The next question by Dr. Yap: what happens when the tooth is carious and roots are close to IDN canal? Do we still go for coronectomy?
That's what I said. If in my chart, in the flow chart, I showed you that if the tooth is carious and is involving the pulp, it has to be removed. So only thing is you have to be extra cautious so that you are not injuring the tooth. You should always inform the patient, assure there will be some amount of nerve traction taking place after some surgeries. Not all the surgeries will not have complications. Some cases will have complications. So you have to assure the patient and reassure the patient and ensure that the full tooth is removed in this condition, and the nerve is regenerated later.
Okay. This is from Dr. Chu Ching Hung. Sorry. Hi, doctor. Prior to MOS, if I don't have povidone iodine for extraoral disinfection, can I use chlorhexidine, or do you have any better suggestion?
I recommend a povidone iodine. That is the best thing for extraoral scrubbing. Chlorhexidine can, but that is not an effective microbicidal.
Okay. This is from Dr. Sean Paul. NICE guidelines was developed for the NH, if I'm not mistaken. But what about a partially erupted mesoangular third molar? which is totally asymptomatic but may give rise to distal caries of the second molar. Is an extraction warranted based on the guidelines? Yeah.
No, for me, according to me, we have to follow the NICE guidelines. So here, the tooth is not fully erupted, right? The root is not fully, the tooth is partially erupted, or the root is not completely formed. So there are chances for the distal caries, but that is not the reason to go for removal of the tooth. We can observe the patient. You can go for a periodic scaling on the distal surface, observe and avoid periodontal pocket formation on the distal surface. If there is a food impaction, then only there are chances of distal caries. Otherwise, no need to go for removal.
Okay, the next question is from Dr. Darren. Out of curiosity, doctor, what is your opinion on the usage of articaine, that is infiltration, instead of the standard mepivacaine or lignocaine in surgical removal of third molars?
We can use it, but most commonly we recommend mepivacaine or lignocaine. Articaine also can be used.
Okay. What is the management of pulp polyp of impacted mandibular third molar of pregnant women in second trimester? I think she has used it. Dr. Susan.
Susan?
Yeah.
Okay. If it is a pulp polyp in the pregnant lady, you can go for pulpotomy. You can remove the pulp polyp and go for a topical, application of a urinal pack and give a medications. So it's not a problem.
Okay. Dr. Siva, treatment plan for limited mouth opening patient.
Yeah, the amount of mouth opening should be 3-finger mouth width of the patient for normal surgery. If the mouth opening is restricted, it is very difficult for us to operate under local anesthesia. So we can plan under general anesthesia.
Dr. Ibrahim was asking, does the mandibular incisive atrophy happen after lower third extraction? Mandibular incisive atrophy.
I think it's about incisive nerve atrophy. No, it depends upon the amount of injury to the nerve. It depends. But generally, it recovers after a few weeks or few months.
Okay. I think Dr. Cindy has asked you to show the horizontal impaction video again because the video was incomplete. Maybe I'm not sure how it can be done, Dr. Cindy. Yeah. Dr. Kumar, you've got any answer for that?
Maybe she can contact me in Facebook. I'll share it later to her mail ID.
Yeah, probably you can share it in your personal Facebook, or Dr. Cindy, we will take your email ID and we'll try to share, because now the time is an issue. Again, we have to go back and share screen and do things. So probably we'll try to share in Dr. Kumar's personal Facebook or Masa Facebook if possible. Thank you. Dr. Turka Devi, hi doctor, may I know your opinion on coronectomy of non-carious third molar by leaving the root portion intact in the bone due to anatomy of the root position due to near to ID canal? I think you have answered this question, but yeah, you can.
Yeah, you can proceed for coronectomy in this type of conditions.
Okay. Dr. Sanjay is asking, what is your take on transoral injection of dexamethasone at the time of operation to reduce post-operative swelling and inflammation?
That's what. If the patient is on long-term steroids, or if the patient is a medically compromised patient, then if you are expecting a more amount of inflammation, then you can think about local dexamethasone or transoral injections. We generally don't recommend for normal healthy patients.
So basically, those risk patients you would like to give this. Dr. Wan Chiling Hong, good morning, Dr. Kumar. Would like to ask, what are the complications which may arise from lingual plate fracture during surgical removal of impacted third molar, and how do we manage it?
Yeah, if the lingual plate fractures and is still there, you can just keep it there, and you can keep a pack and suture it. Otherwise, you can remove the lingual plate, and if there's a sharp bony margins, we have to smoothen it. The other complication can be lingual nerve injury, which can result in lingual paresthesia. So you should be very careful. That is why we don't encourage your bird to go on the lingual side.
Okay. Dr. Sean Paul asking again, may I know your opinion, doctor, on prednisolone, Papace or Papain as post-operative medication?
That's what, as I said, if you expect more severe post-operative inflammation, in case of immunocompromised patients or patients who are on long-term steroid therapies, you can give this. Otherwise, you don't need for normal patients. Only for medically compromised patients or who are on long-term therapy, you can give this.
Okay. Dr. Mabel is asking, hi, Dr. Kumar, what is the management of severe gag reflex patient prior and during MOS?
The severe gag reflex is very uncooperative for us, basically. So what you can do is you can go for I recommend for general anesthesia, basically.
Okay. I think Dr. Sean Paul's and last question is, I know we aren't supposed to use high speed for MOS, but honestly, I've seen many clinicians using high speed without backvent. What is your take on that? And could you share with us if you have had any experience with surgical emphysema?
Definitely, you should not use such high-speed handpieces, especially what we use for the drills in the conservative industry. If you use that, you'll land up in emphysema. So my advice, not only mine, generally it's not recommended for using a high-speed handpiece for surgical procedures.
Dr. Aistia asking about clinical features of dry socket. I think you've explained in your presentation, Dr. Kumar.
Yeah. So, Dr. Aisha, the clinical feature of dry socket is nothing but the patient will have severe throbbing pain. The pain starts only after 48 hours, after the second day. Second post-operative day, the pain is very severe, throbbing pain. There will be dislodgement of the clot clinically, and there will be halitosis with the patient.
Okay, Dr. Mabel's again question, what is the difference between post-MOS complication as such infection and dry socket? I mean, she's trying to differentiate between dry socket and infection.
Yeah. So dry socket will restrict only to that area. I mean, the pain will be severe, throbbing pain will be there. The patient will have foul smell. There will be dislodgement of the clot. You can see a slough on the socket, all these things. Even in infection, you can see that. In infection, pain may not be so severe like dry socket, but still infection is present. It can be extended. So dry socket is also a type of infection only.
Okay. Dr. Pradeep Jayaprakash, my patient is at first trimester of pregnancy with severe pain, not controlled with painkillers, badly decayed horizontal impaction. Shall I proceed with surgical removal or have to wait for the second trimester?
You try to manage with the painkillers. If it is not effective, then you have to go for removal. Maybe at a second trimester it will be better. If you're not able to control, you discuss with the patient's gynecologist and then you can proceed.
Do we need to cover antibiotic prophylaxis for every case? Dr. Raghavendra is asking.
Dr. Raghavendra, definitely not. We don't need to give antibiotics for all the patients. Only for medically compromised patients or the procedure is a long duration procedures, you can go for antibiotics. Otherwise, no need.
Okay, do we need? Okay, what are the indications for patients suffering from B-RONJ or M-RONJ? I'm not sure.
Yeah, these patients who are under radiotherapy, post-radiotherapy, we have to see how much dosage has been given and when was the last duration, when was it done. So all these things has to be taken into consideration before planning. Otherwise, you will end up in osteoradionecrosis.
Okay. Doctor, if a patient, Dr. Snowy is asking, if a patient that completed radiotherapy, we need to wait at least 6 months or 1 year to proceed for MOS if indicated?
At least 6 months is better.
Okay. Is there a possibility of tissue pocket formation months after operation of cyst removal? Dr. Nurul is asking.
Yeah, Dr. Nurul, if the closure is not proper, there are chances of recurrence. If it is not properly enucleated and not properly closed, there are chances of chances for recurrence.
Dr. Padma Prasad is asking, good afternoon, doctor. I've tried coronectomy, but patient had throbbing pain afterwards. I had to prescribe stronger painkillers. In your experience, do you have had such cases and how do you manage?
So when I say coronectomy, you're removing only the crown. When you're removing the crown, you should ensure that you're not touching the pulp. When you're touching the pulp, you're close to the pulp, definitely patient will have throbbing severe pain whenever he takes hot or cold things. So should be very cautious. So coronectomy is indicated, which means not the entire crown is removed, only the enamel is removed. A portion of dentina also can be removed, but the pulp should be protected.
So basically, when we do coronectomy, we have to make sure that we don't touch the pulp.
Yes.
Only then it is okay. Yeah, okay. Dr. Karen Lin is asking, is INR required for patient taking NOAC or heparin?
For NOACs, generally, we are not going to stop. We advise the patient. NOAC is nothing but novel oral anticoagulants. We advise the patients to stop on the morning, and we advise the patient to take in the evening. So INR is not required for patients on novel oral anticoagulants. Generally, it is given for minor cases. But heparin, definitely, we have to check INR. We have to discuss with the patient's physicians. Then we have to decide. The INR has to be done within 24 hours. Within 24 hours, that is more important.
Okay, Dr. Fang is asking, hi doctor, do we prescribe antibiotic for pericoronitis?
Yes, obviously. Pericoronitis can be because of aerobic or anaerobic infections. It can be mixed infections. So we have to go for antibiotic and anti-anaerobic like metronidazole.
Hi sir, nice presentation. Dr. Sugnesh then is asking, my question is, can we use PRF membrane for treating dry socket?
We can. Immediately after, there are some places where they use PRF, all these things immediately after surgery. We can.
Dr. Say Ling is asking, should we curate the socket in case of dry socket to induce fresh blood to promote healing?
No, we don't curate the socket. We just clean the socket superficially. You should not go deep and remove the entire thing. You just remove only the superficial slough.
Okay, sorry, I think I missed few questions. Let us see a few more. Dr. Maruf Kayumov. Doctor, if the patient is prescribed to extract both of the impacted mandibular teeth, is it better to extract both of them within one appointment, or it should be done in 2 different appointments?
No, if it is under local anesthesia, it is under 2 different appointments. But if it is same side, upper and lower, we can go on a single visit, single appointment. But if it's the contralateral side, it's not on a single visit. If you want to do everything in a single visit, under general anesthesia, we can do.
Okay. Dr. Sanjay is asking, non-selective COX-2 inhibitors like Cerebrex and Arcoxia, safe or patients on anticoagulants? Thanks.
It depends. It depends upon what type of anticoagulants they're taking. If they're taking warfarin and all, they have to discuss with the patient's physicians. It is not safe. Not all the non-selective COX-2 inhibitors are safe for patients on warfarin or heparin.
Dr. Mukesh Goel, how to avoid injury to facial artery or any artery while during surgery, and if it happened, how to manage artery bleeding?
Generally, facial artery we will not encounter because it is anteriorly placed to the masseter, so you will not touch the facial artery until you extend the distal, vertical down incision obliquely down till the lower vestibular space. So you will not enter that. Okay. The other arteries, minor arteries, you might engage while doing on the things. That is why when you are making an incision, make a firm incision, and with the mucoperiosteum you reflect, and bleeding will be very minimal in that conditions. If at all, if you engage, if you feel bleeding from the artery, you have to ligate it or you have to arrest it, then you can proceed for the next step.
Dr. Jaimin Pereira, what is the Warline plan? Missed the first part of the webinar. I think for all those who have missed or who joined us later, you don't have to worry. This webinar will be kept in Facebook of Masa University. You can go to Masa Facebook page and you can always have a look at it. Yeah, Dr. Kumar, you can.
Yeah, my PowerPoint will also be there in SlideShare. You can refer it later.
Okay, that's wonderful. Thank you very much for that. Dr. Padmini is asking, Dr. Kumar, your opinion on if to do the extraction with pericoronal abscess or pericoronitis in the same visit or delay after the acute phase?
Thanks, Dr. Padmini. If it is acute phase, we don't do the extraction because acute infection is one of the contraindication for surgery. So the abscess has to be subsided, then we can go for removal.
Okay. Dr. Joanne is asking, thank you for the presentation. May I know your opinion for MX or treatment? I don't know, MX of management probably. Yeah, management of grossly carious impacted third molar in patients who have undergone RT due to MPC. Also for patients who are on long-term bisphosphonates.
Yes. So we have to remove the tooth, grossly decayed tooth. We have to remove that. So the bone reduction should be very minimal, provided since the patient is on long bisphosphonates, you have to take extra caution. And when was the radiotherapy done? If it is within 6 months, better to avoid.
Okay. Dr. Fu is asking, you said that long surgical procedures need to cover antibiotics. Can I know how long is that? I mean, he's asking how long. He or she is asking how long. Yeah.
Normally the minor surgical procedure should be 30 minutes to 45 minutes, maximum 1 hour. More than 1 hour, the first thing is anesthesia will not work. You have to go for extra dosage, so which is also not good. But still, the procedure is by accidentally it is extending more than 1 hour. You can call it as long.
Dr. Ibrahim is asking, do you support the early extraction of asymptomatic lower third impaction surgically? I think you have answered that question.
Definitely
No,
not.
yes. Okay, I think we are covering most of the questions. That's a good sign. I will just check few more comments coming up. I think we still have a bit of time. Okay. Somebody giving, let us take one or two compliments. Thank you, doctor, for your presentation and explanations for the questions. Hoping someday I will have the experience and knowledge like you, Dr. Aisha.
Wishing you all the best, Dr. Aisha.
Okay, okay, we have got one more question by Dr. Ran Lee. Hi, doctor. For pericoronitis case, should you prescribe antibiotics for 2 days or to reduce the inflammation before extraction, or can straight away do the extraction?
If it's a pericoronitis, it's an infection, right? So you have to give antibiotics, so reduce the infection. Then, if it is recurrently occurring, then you have to go for removal of the tooth.
Okay. The next question is, hi, doctor. How about use of pentoxiflin or tocopherol for patients undergoing extraction following RT?
Honestly, I don't have any idea about this. Sorry.
Okay.
I'll answer you later.
Yeah, you can always answer in the comment section, Dr. Kumar.
Yeah.
Dr. Joan, we will be answering you later.
I have never used this drug, so I'll answer you later.
Okay, Dr. Sara Zahidi, what is the type of medication that you usually prescribe for post-MOS?
I prescribe only painkiller, which is either Brufen or mefenamic acid, 400 milligrams or 500 milligrams. If it is a Brufen 400 milligrams, I give PRN. That means I don't give twice daily for 6 days or 5 days. I give only PRN. That is, first day patient will take 30 minutes or after 1 hour. And then on the day night they can take. From the next day only the pain is there, patient can take. Otherwise, no need for painkillers. So I prescribe mefenamic acid, that is Ponstan 500 milligrams or ibuprofen 400 milligrams.
Dr. Sean Paul is asking, arising from your explanation, but I thought coronectomy is sectioning of 2-3 millimeter below the bone level. How do we not touch the pulp, doctor?
Yeah, it is below the bone level, right? But you have to be very cautious. If you're opening the pulp, try to extirpate the pulp out.
Okay. So if at all you touch the pulp, you have to do sort of root canal, is it?
Yeah, root canal or pulpotomy, something like that.
Yes. Okay, thank you. I think we have answered all questions, but you all can answer. You all can question anytime. We will be. Dr. Kumar will be watching this Facebook, and we will be answering as soon as we can answer.
Yes.
I think all of you got your answers. If any question I missed, you can please type it again so that we can answer in the new comments, because I'm looking through all the questions, but I can't find any new question. So if I miss anything, can you please question again? Yeah. Dr. Kumar, we still have a bit of time. It's only 1 hour 25 minutes. So.
Okay, no problem.
I think Dr. Wong Hong Zhang has asked this question. Did we answer this already? Yes. With various yeses that we have answered.
Yeah.
Okay. Dr. N. Atika is asking, thanks, Dr. Kumar, for the great presentation. May I ask what's the best analgesic to prescribe post-operatively and what's the right dosage?
I generally follow Ponstan, mefenamic acid, 500 milligrams, 6 tablets PRN. If you feel the patient will have more of inflammation, you can go for ibuprofen, provided the patient is not having wheezing problem and the patient is not having any gastric problem. These two are most commonly prescribed drugs.
Derek is asking, Dr. Derek is asking, is amoxicillin avoided in pregnant mom, you mentioned?
Yeah, I avoid amoxicillin also. during pregnancy.
Okay. Dr. Anurag is asking, what are the precautions to take if tooth near to the inferior alveolar nerve?
That's what it depends upon the severity. Based upon the classifications, we decide whether to go for coronectomy or total removal of the tooth or not. If it is very close to the nerve, if you're not confident with the OPG, go for a CBCT. Then according to the CBCT, you can plan the technique.
Dr. Sajid saying, say hi on my behalf. Dr. Sajid from Chennai.
Thanks, Dr. Sajid. Hope you are doing well. He's my senior.
Okay. I think we have answered all the questions. Oh, sorry. Yeah. I will. Sorry, this is I couldn't lock the door, and we have some intruder. Anyway, I think we have done amazing session today. Sean Paul is saying great session, Masa University. Dr. Kumar and Dr. Kranti Raja, sorry for the multiple questions. Dr. Sean, thank you for your questions. We are happy to have your questions. Not sorry, we'll be very, very happy. Dr. Sean, we see that you are also doing a lot of webinars. I think our aim of any webinar is to promote knowledge and skills to as many people as possible. I think Dr. Kumar will be very happy to answer all the questions. Yeah,
Sure.
We've got one more question by Dr. Ming Ho Tan. How predictable is auto transplantation of wisdom tooth to replace loss of 6s and 7s?
Yeah, we can do that in a healthy patient. If you suppose 6 is lost, grossly decayed, you can extract the tooth on the same day. You can do the transplantation. The success rate is more than 60%. Provided proper protocol is followed, proper infection control protocol is followed, and post-operative instruction is followed, the predictable rate is very good.
Okay, I think thank you very much, Dr. Kumar. We have come to the end of the session. I think a lot of people are wishing us Happy Teachers Day. I think maybe some of our students.
Thank you all for Teachers Day.
So thank you for joining. Yeah, we all thank you for wishing us Teachers Day. I hope you all are enjoying today's Saturday, and we see a lot of people still watching live. Thank you very much. I hope Masa University is giving the right kind of topics you require. Your questions or your comments are very, very, very valuable to us. That gives a lot of feedback, and that gives a lot of things to improvise to deliver knowledge more effectively. I just would like to add upon that, as Dr. Kumar said, that Masa University is planning to do a lot of courses and workshops for not only for the students, but also for all those who are interested to do. Especially, I think Faculty of Dentistry Oral Surgery Department is doing some hands-on courses led by Dr. Wan. You all are welcome to join. I just also would like to add upon that we are also planning few of the online courses. I think the first one which will be coming is from our department, that is endodontics, online endodontic courses. But we are also planning for more courses. I think probably after looking at today's response, I don't know whether it is because Dr. Kumar is speaking or is it because the topic is good. For whatever reason, we would just look at online courses as well. So for oral surgery as well, we will definitely talk to the department and we will try to give some info. Okay. Then Dr. Kumar, you want to do any concluding remarks? Sorry,
I know. I should thank my son and my daughter for keeping silence.
You should thank them more now.
Yeah. Especially to my wife also, controlling them.
Yeah. So
Thanks,
okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Kumar. I think you have done an excellent job today. We will continue doing what we are doing. Next week, we will be having one more topic. We will be letting you know very soon. Probably it will be by Dr. Mohan Bhuvaneshwaran from India. He'll be talking on laminates, ceramic laminates. It will be a great presentation. Please do join us, and we will keep you updated. Okay? Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody.